Thanks
because
for having me on here.
we will find you.
That's right. You will. You absolutely will.
All right. It's good to have you on, Judge. It's good to have you on tonight.
Well,
Appreciate it.
well, thanks. Oh, it's my pleasure. Thanks for having me. It's great.
So, a couple of things here. First of all, you are in the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals, right? You're at number
That's
5
right.
in the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals. And for people that don't have a clue what that means, which is myself until I looked it up, that I think is the map of the Court of Appeals. And you're number 5. Does that look right? So you're right in the middle of the state?
That does. That
Okay.
looks correct to me.
So that's your jurisdiction, that's your area. So anybody who has a lower level court, or they some type of a court problem, they didn't feel they got a fair shake with it, then they can go and appeal it to you or
Right.
your team. I'm sure there's several of you at least.
There's 6 of us.
Okay, 6 of you. So then you may or may not listen to that case, but if you do listen to it, it sounds an awful lot like you're part of the Ohio Supreme Court. I mean, it sounds like that's exactly what they do. But I think that you guys, are just a part of Ohio and stuff, and you don't oversee the entire state, I guess. But so that's good. So that's what you're doing right now. And I should also preface by saying that you are one of the judges running for the Ohio Supreme Court seat against Jennifer Brunner.
That is
And
correct.
you want to get rid of that Democrat, which is a good thing. We want to see it. So
Absolutely.
Andrew, give us a little background on yourself here, just a minute or two. Fill us in. Woo us with your with a little background information about yourself here. Pretend you're auditioning.
Well, I mean, if this is like American Idol, I would be one of the people given the hook. I'm sorry to say I did not inherit my mom's singing skills.
Yeah.
But well, I mean, for me, I came at the law as something that I didn't grow up in a family of lawyers. I didn't grow up thinking I could be a judge. My dad was a high school dropout. My mom was a college dropout. She later became a teacher. And my dad, they met as deputy sheriffs, and then later he became a business owner. And he passed on when I was in 8th grade. So I grew up, was really the first person in my family to go to college in any sort of traditional sense. I was, as far as I know, the only person anywhere in my family go to law school. So I mean, all that was new. There was no lawyers in my family, no judges in my family. I think I have like a distant uncle that was a sheriff in Perry County, but I mean, like long before me, I never met him. So no one ever involved in elected politics. So it was all new. So, it was an opportunity for me to do it all for the first time. And, there was a lot of learning along the way of what to do, what not to do. Like a lot of people in life, right? You have setbacks, you have disappointments, you have things that don't work out. And, I was fortunate enough to get an opportunity to run and for the Court of Appeals. So, I mean, backing up just to here, I worked for a Court of Appeals judge for 2 years, and I thought, I really enjoy this. I want to do this. So I had an opportunity to run against an incumbent Democrat, and that's, one of the setbacks I mentioned. The first time I ran, didn't work out. It was 2018 when we lost both Supreme Court seats and a bunch of judgeships around the state. But then, when you do that, you work hard, it can pay off. So then when I ran again the second time, I won the primary, beat a different incumbent, and I've been a Court of Appeals judge ever since. So I mean, that's sort of where I come from. That's my background. My wife and I, we met at OSU. We were married young, and we'll be married 30 years next year, so 29 this year.
Congratulations on that. Wow.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. So, what's nice about having a partner like that is I was a night student at Capitol. I went to work during the day, went to school at night, studied on the weekends. And then after I was done, my wife actually went back to school to become a nurse. So she got her RN, BSN, is now a nurse practitioner. So it was about a decade there that we took turns supporting each other and helping raise the kids. So, that's all of that sort of is makes me who I am today and how I got to where I'm at today. So,
That's awesome. Yeah,
so I don't know if that wowed you,
What-
but that's that's the story.
that's quite an awesome story. So Brian is still trying to figure out his camera, but hey, I want to ask you a question here. So
technical difficulties.
what let me ask you a question here. So you would be taking over Bruner's seat, okay? Now she's the only Democrat that's on the Ohio Supreme Court right now. The only Democrat.
Right.
We got all Republicans, and we got to get rid of that last Democrat, okay? Now, you're not the only one. There's like 4 or 5 judges. I can't even remember how many. There's like 4 or 5 that are trying to vie for that one seat. And one of the most interesting ones is Pat Fisher, because Pat Fisher is already on the Supreme Court. He is a Ohio Supreme Court justice right now. But he wants to take that other seat, and that would give him, because he's almost at the age of 70 where he has to retire, so that would give him another 4 years beyond what he has now. So he could extend into that. Now, here's something that you said in regards to Fisher. I just want to quote this. But you were saying that his lack of prosecution experience is a real concern. And then you go on to say that a majority of the Supreme Court judges who have prosecution, felony criminal cases, I guess prosecutorial experience, so to speak. Why is that? Why is that so important for somebody who wants to be on the Ohio Supreme Court?
Well, I mean, I would say at my Court of Appeals, about 50% of the cases are criminal cases. And almost all of those are felony cases, which means some county prosecutor's office has brought those. And I mean, you have longtime county prosecutors and Joe Dieters and Megan Shanahan and Dan Hawkins. And, as someone who's been in those rooms to make decisions on whether or not to charge someone, worked on cases, tried cases, and, helped others prepare for cases, I understand what goes into it. I understand what it's like to sit across the table from a victim in a terrible, terrible, terrible case and try to get that child victim to talk about what went on. So, given the fact that roughly half of the cases in my court are felony criminal cases, having that background, on the prosecutor side of working with law enforcement, working with the victims and victims advocates, and knowing how to put those cases together and what goes into charging decisions, I think is invaluable experience. It helps bring a perspective to those cases that you wouldn't otherwise have if all you've ever done are civil cases or been a government lawyer or whatever. So I think that sort of thing does matter, because you understand it in a way that someone that's never done it understands it. Excuse me.
I got you. All right, let's open it up. You guys want to ask the judge a question? Go ahead.
I've got questions and comments. So the first thing is, to our audience, bear with us. Joe actually, if you didn't hear this, has actually just returned from vacation just before starting this show. So our start on the technology side is a little bit different than normal. And it turns out, so normally there are several of us that like to monitor the chat room, and unfortunately we missed some. I see that some people commented during the Rep. Gross segment, and I apologize to you. We didn't actually include those, we missed those. And that goes on all of us. In the future, we try to do our best, please know, to get your questions answered when we have opportunities to speak with people like Rep. Gross. That's my first comment. The next thing is, Mr. King, thank you for joining us. We appreciate you coming on and telling us about yourself. From my perspective, your story, I like. It resonates with me. I want to say you kind of blue-collared your way through law school and onto a bench, which I think is awesome. It gives you a different perspective, I think, than a lot of the sort of political gravy train, easy deal into judgeship. So personally, I find your story compelling. But I have a comment that's coupled with a question. I work in finance. I came from a Wall Street background, and I've watched since 2006, at least, in my realm, in the world of finance, as the left political, I call it the long, slow march, the march of communism into the pillars of our society. I see it in finance, and I actually talk about it a lot. And I've actually made the comment several times that I think that the world of finance, if we get back to freedom, free market economy, I think finance is going to be the second to the last pillar of society to right itself and get back to business as usual. And I think the very last will be legal and judiciary. There is so much, in my opinion, looking at these judges with these ludicrous rulings and just anti-constitutional. Actually, I think some are rabidly anti-America and anti-West and have never picked up or ignored the constitutions, state and federal. I am I'm very concerned that we must do a better job of putting people on the bench who care about our great nation, the freedoms that we enjoy, our liberties, and our constitutions. So I'd like to ask your feedback on your value system and how much you value and how much fight you have and willingness to get onto the bench and fight for the conservative values that Ohio holds dear.
Well, I appreciate that. And I mean, the reason that I am running for the Supreme Court is it sounds like you. I mean, I've seen a lot of what's gone on in the judiciary. I mean, not even just in Ohio, but, nationwide over the last 4, 5, 6 years. And I suspect if you were able to get President Trump on this podcast, he would tell you that he's got a newfound appreciation for a fair, unbiased judiciary and a judiciary that operates by the rule of law. So, I think we've got plenty of examples. I mean, everyone, you and your audience can think of something recent, far away, of just a judge legislating from the bench, substituting their decision for somebody else's decision that is the rightful decision maker, and trying to create policy from the bench, and that which should happen at the legislature or sometimes, on the executive branch. So, and I think your point is exactly what I understood to be to be underlying your point there is the best way that we can ensure we have judges that are faithful to the Constitution, to the rule of law, to our wonderful system of checks and balances and adherence to the Constitution is by putting the right judges into those seats. Again, everyone could think of a situation where a president or state Supreme Court justice or local judge has been put in a situation. You think, well, they'll do the right thing when they're put in those spot, and then they don't. So that the best thing that we've seen at the federal level is presidents putting people like Justice Alito, Justice Thomas on the bench to sort of right the ship judicially, and we've begun to see that at the state level by putting constitutional conservatives on the bench. And the best way we do it in Ohio is we unelect those folks that don't share those values and view the judiciary just as another opportunity to exercise their personal preference under the guise of being fair. So we unelect those people and we replace them. And that's, I think that's why I'm running. That's why I'm hoping to give folks that choice, that when they're looking at candidates, they can say, well, here's somebody who will do the right thing. I mean, part of being a judge is you have to adhere to your oath and have courage and say that's right when it's unpopular, or that's wrong when it's unpopular. And that's all grounded in the law, the Constitution, the statutes of the state of Ohio. So it's kind of a long answer. So if I didn't quite hit it, I'm happy to be a little bit more specific.
I think it was fine. Brian, did you have a question for the judge?
Yes. What have you seen in our society, the times from the time you've been on the bench? Have you seen a drastic change in our society as far as the immorality, of our society? And we basically say that we're an ungodly, uneducated, and immoral society. In your role as judge, would you agree with that assessment?
I mean, we certainly are folks that need grace. We're folks that need forgiveness. We're folks that need, you know, guidance from God, from a higher power. So, I mean, we're all imperfect and fallen. So, I mean, I think that much is true. We see those sorts of people come in. At our level, you know, we're not sentencing people face to face where you get the opportunity to see them be remorseful, and say they're remorseful. But, you know, by and large, I mean, in my 15 counties, you know, it between, you know, what we see with the the drug epidemic, you know, and other contributing factors. I mean, there's certainly a lot of very serious crime against women and children that go on, even in rural counties and places you would think that wouldn't happen. So, you know, I do think we as a society could certainly do a better job, you know, helping folks that have gone down a bad path, that have, you know, made some mistakes, have fallen, and then those folks that are, you know, unrepentant. I mean, one of the options obviously is you put them away, and then you incapacitate them by imprisoning them, and they can't hurt anyone else. So, you know, so that sometimes has to be the way that it goes. So,
Would you also concur with the statement that number one problem in our society would be the breakdown of the traditional family structure, and to go along with that the seemingly the ineffectiveness of our church to talk about the traditional morals that we may have had 50, 100, 150 years ago no longer seem to apply to our society, and the churches have no impact, it seems like.
I mean, I certainly have seen, just, you know, in the community and family and friends and, you know, classmates and schoolmates that, you know, folks are not as oriented towards civic religious organizations as they used to be. And that certainly has an impact. And I think to your first point about the family, I mean, where we see an overwhelming number of our, you know, permanent custody cases where the state is taking the child away from usually both parents, but sometimes it's just one. And that's usually there, has been significant failures of those parents, and they're not married. And there's usually, children out of wedlock. There's often drug use. There's all sorts of accompanying issues. So, you know, you know, as a personal matter, I mean, as a judge, there's kind of limited things that I can do, you know, when it comes to trying to facilitate folks to be good family members. But, you know, I think it matters, and I think a lot of our juvenile courts around the state do try to do just that, and try to help parents be better parents. And then there are success stories where folks get clean, follow the program, work with the social worker. But, you know, again, to your earlier point, it's all sort of downstream of the fact that there's a general coarseness in, I think, society, and a lack of family cohesion. So, you know, I definitely think it's a contributing factor, without a doubt, in my mind.
Hey, Andrew,
Thank you very much.
Let me ask you a question here. So now we're moving into the phase with you that, you know, you want to be a Ohio Supreme Court justice. So you want to take the next step. I think that would be the next step from where you're at. You know, you're an appellate judge in the 5th District. I think the next step up would be for the Ohio Supreme Court. So what differentiates you from some of these other judges that are trying to fight for that position? You know, what advantages do you have, or, you know, selling points or whatever?
Well, I mean, to sort of your earlier point when you asked me to introduce myself, I believe very firmly in hard work, and that, I mean, there's always the hand of God, fate, providence that it plays in everyone's life, and sometimes doors are shut for you because something else opens. But at the end of the day, if you're not willing to put the work in, you're not willing to do what is necessary, then you don't deserve what you may get, and you certainly are unlikely to appreciate it. So, I mean, that's the ethic I've taken with me going to law school. I mean, like I mentioned, I worked during the day. I had like a Saturday job at a call center. I was a TA at a point, and I still did. I was and I worked while doing that. I did other extracurricular activities, graduated well in my class, and it's through that hard work. So I think, Joe, just to bring it to a finer point, is this weekend was the 71st different county that I was in since the beginning of the year. I think I hit 54 different Lincoln dinners as part of that. And I've been talking to your colleagues, been talking to party chairs, been out there talking to voters, and I think that's, if you're going to be successful statewide, you have to replicate something like what Sharon Kennedy and Bernie Moreno have done. Is you got to be out there and you got to be talking to the voters. You got to have a presence, and they got to know you and they got to want to vote for you. And that's true whether it's in the suburbs or the rural areas. It doesn't matter. You got to do it. And then just as a general matter, my background, just personally, having had to sort of work for that, for my wife having to work for the things that she got. And, having worked as a prosecutor, worked in state and local government, I feel like I do bring a perspective to this that a lot of other folks just don't have and just don't bring to it. And I firmly believe it's complementary to what some of the strengths that other justices on the court may have. So, aside from the hard work, aside from the background and the philosophical belief of being a constitutional conservative, it's just my professional background of having touched so many different things, and whether it's state, federal, civil, criminal, local government, private. I've done a lot, and I think it's helped me as a Court of Appeals judge to have some familiarity of most of what comes in front of me, and that's obviously something I would take with me up to the Supreme Court.
Oh, I got you. So, yeah, it's got to be tough for judges. Judges by nature are not politicians. You're not out there tooting your own horn or anything like that. The politicians are like, give me the microphone and let me go. Judges are kind of like, well, let me just sit over in the corner here a little bit. And I'm not saying that's you, but I'm just saying that they're a little bit more, by themselves or whatever. But I mean, you've got a wonderful personality. And I ran into you at the Lincoln Day, and you're out there, talking to people, politicking, doing what you can. I mean, that to me is the most important thing. When I get a phone call from somebody, a politician or something, or a judge, that is just so much more impressive to me than the resume, But although I did get a resume from one judge, and the paper that it was on must have cost like $10 a sheet. I couldn't believe it. I wouldn't even want to touch the paper. It was like soft cotton. It was magnificent. But then I was like, why are you doing this? But anyhow, hey, let me get Jonathan in here, ask you a question, a philosophical, strong question.
All right.
All yours.
I'm ready.
Okay, so I think the only thing left on my mind, and you can comment on this or not, I'll leave that up to you. I'm fishing around for more information about how we, the people of Ohio average citizens, can work to right the ship. And I've actually just recently, this is an area that's unfamiliar to me, so bear with me as I sort of navigate my question. I'm very curious about how rogue or bad judges may be removed from the bench. And what I've learned so far is there is a mechanism or process to go to the Ohio Supreme Court and complain effectively about other judges in Ohio. So, for instance, if somebody exceeds their authority from the bench, or think that it's a bad ruling because there's political favoritism or that sort of thing, I'm wondering if you have comments about that process, and if you have any recommendations for those of us out here who are new-ish to paying attention to the judiciary.
Sure. No, I'm happy to do my best to answer that as simply and straightforward as I can. So I would start by saying, if if it's about a particular case and how a particular case was handled or a particular outcome, my advice would, not while the case is ongoing, but when it's sort of reached a point where the case is done and it's not in the judge's hands anymore. I mean, as Joe mentioned, we are elected officials. Part of the reason I think Ohio has persisted in electing judges is so there's some accountability back to the people, and that we are reflective of the communities from which we come from and then we serve. So on things like that, I would just ask. I mean, I've had a couple of times where folks have asked, either, complimenting or criticizing, and I mean, the person may walk away not convinced that my decision was right on that, but at least I've given them the opportunity to ask, and I've had the opportunity to explain why I did it. Because occasionally, and I've had this happen a few times, where you might decide the decision differently if you were sitting in the trial judge's seats, but that's not our job to just be a Monday morning quarterback on everything. So that's sometimes the answer is like, hey, maybe I would have done things differently, but that's not my role as an appellate judge. For more serious misconduct, I serve on the Board of Professional Conduct, which is the body that hears a lot of those complaints. And I think we've had at least one, if not two, judicial complaints since I've been there. So, I mean, there is a mechanism where you can file a grievance. It goes, to a committee or kind of an ethics prosecutor that reviews it, and they can file a complaint. And then there's a hearing process and possible testimony, and then it would come to us as the board to make a recommendation of whether there was misconduct, and then whether or not what the sanctions should be, and then we're reviewed by the Ohio Supreme Court, which gets the final say. So, I mean, if you do think it is something unethical, and sometimes judges mess up, right? I mean, we're people. I think there's been some cases of judges on social media are doing this, that, and the other thing, and then they get a public reprimand. Hey, you weren't supposed to do that. Don't do that. But there's certainly more serious cases where there's been misconduct on the behalf of family members, or financial misconduct, or things like that may warrant something more severe. Mistreating litigants, we've had a couple of judges in the last few years lose their seat from just improper courtroom decorum and just not handling things right. And then the third thing, that if you are a litigant in a case and you think that the particular judge has some sort of bias, or has said something during the course of a campaign or during an open court, that you think that judge should not hear that your case in front of the case that's going on in front of that judge, you can actually file what's called an affidavit of disqualification with the Chief Justice and say, hey Chief, I don't think this particular judge should hear this case because of all these reasons why the judge might be biased or appear to be biased or whatever. And every once in a while the chief will take a judge off the case and force that judge to stand down and another judge to come along. So, are any of those solutions perfect? No. I mean, they all have their ills that they're trying to cure, and there's certainly gaps in each way. But the three together do a fairly good job of I think, electoral accountability, responsibility of the Supreme Court, the Board of Professional Conduct, and then being disqualified in particular cases. I think covers a lot. Not perfect, but I think it does cover a lot.
Andrew, let me ask you one last question for tonight, and it is Father's Day, so happy Father's Day to you and everybody else here. So if you're on the Court of Appeals right now, and what do you guys do when there's like three are saying yay and three are saying no, how do you reconcile that? Or do you guys sit down like as a group and just hash it out and get ideas from each other, or do you work independently? What is the process on that?
Well, if I'm coming up against time, just cut me off, and if I'm going too long. But I'll try to give you a thorough explanation here without boring you with lawyer procedural stuff. So the first instance in which folks attempt to persuade us and say, hey, the trial court committed an error below, you should do something about it, is through briefing. So that we get a brief from the person who filed the appeal, we get a brief from the person who typically won below and says, hey, one side says, hey, you should do something and reverse it and send it back. The other side says, no, this is perfectly fine. So we read those, and then on a particular day, there's an oral argument where attorneys, we've had some people that represent themselves come in, so it can be people, will argue to us. So every side gets 15 minutes and they can make, well, the legal arguments that they think we need to hear. And on those days, although there's 6 of us on the court, we sit in panels of 3. So the Ohio Supreme Court, all 7 justices sit at once and hear the case. The U.S. Supreme Court's the same way. Intermediate Court of Appeals, it's a random assignment of usually 3 judges on the panel from how many ever judges serve on the court. And so, we'll hear those arguments, and then we'll go back and we'll talk about them. And, we'll say, hey, this is what I think. We kind of go around in order. Usually when I'm the presiding judge, I'll, kind of dictate the order and all that. And we have an opportunity to talk about it. Somebody's going to start writing it up, and then we circulate it. And then even sometimes then we'll say, hey, well, I'm not sure about this, or let's rethink this. So there is a lot of discussion and back and forth. And the same basic thing happens at the Ohio Supreme Court. As a Court of Appeals judge, as you indicated earlier, we do very similar things to what the Ohio Supreme Court does. So we when a justice has a conflict, we could sit there. So I last year got to actually sit for Justice Fisher, and the same thing. We hear the arguments, we go back in the room, and we talk about them, and we all sort of say, here's how we think it's going to be. An opinion gets written up, we circulate it, and then we're agreeing with it or disagreeing with it. So typically, at least if 2 of us agree, then it goes forward. And I've written dissents. I've been on other cases where the judge says, hey, the other 2 got it wrong, and then the Supreme Court may take it. So I had a case recently where I essentially wrote separately and said, hey, in so many words, this is something maybe the Supreme Court should look at, and then they took it. So so we may all agree, but then we still may write separately. So that's typically how we handle making a decision. And then if we have some disagreement about the way the case is written up or drafted, is we can then write separately, or even just say you just got it wrong, you just blew it.
Hey, I want to say thanks again. The applause. I don't know why we're applauding. No, get that out of here. But anyhow, thank you very much. So it's not like I was told. I was told that you guys just go back there and like flip a coin or something, and then it's like heads win, tails. But thank God it's not that. Hey, thanks a lot.
No, it's not.
Appreciate your time very much. Thanks, guys. Thanks to the Peanut Gallery here. Say, Lou, happy Father's Day.
Thank
everybody.
you, Judge Gig. Appreciate it very much.
Yes,
Thank you,
Judge.
Thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you
Thank
very
you, Judge.
much for coming out. Really appreciate it. Thank you for taking the time.
Oh,
tonight.
thank you.
And good luck.
And I always happy, as I said, as elected official, we do have responsibility to talk to the folks, and the judiciary and the whole aspect of the courts can be mystifying. So I think it's incumbent upon us to demystify it as much as we can. So I appreciate the opportunity.
Thank
really
you.
do.
Yeah, thank you again. We appreciate it. All right, everybody.
Thanks.
See you later. Have a good night. Talk to you soon.
Good night, Al.
Bye, Joe.